audio and video, 2 different files. So, okay. I'd actually prepared something else for for this class, but I was doing some research and I came across this letter, which I think is really, really worth learning. It's in the Sefer Migdal Oz from Yeshua Monshine. It's printed by Chabad, but he lives in Yerushalayim. And Lubavitcher Chassid, you probably have heard of him, I'm sure, by now. This letter is a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Rebbe Rashab writes to the Frierdiker Rebbe in response to a question that the Frierdiker Rebbe asked him. And later on, the same letter is printed as part of a Sicha that the Rebbe Rashab gave on Yutes Kislev, and it's in one of his sofas in Torah Sholem, page 185, in Torah Sholem, which is the Sichas of the Rebbe Rashab. And this letter is quoted by the Rebbe in Inyona Shel Torah Chassidus. And this letter is actually the basis for the Ike Inyan in Inyona Shel Torah Chassidus. So it's well worth learning. As you can see, it's from the time of Tafresh Ayin Dalad, which was during the Hemshech of Ayin Beis. Ayin Beis was said over a number of years. It started in Ayin Beis, B'Shashik Dimu. Ayin Beis is the famous Hemshech in Chassidus, probably the most famous Hemshech in Chassidus. And it began in Ayin Beis, but it continued for several years through to, I think, Ayin Vav, if I'm not mistaken. Ayin Vav, maybe even the beginning of Ayin Zayin. So this here is a letter that was written during that time. And the Frierdiker Rebbe had asked, what's the Mahus Inyan Chassidus? Well, you'll see from the response what the Rebbe Rashab says. Mahus Inyan Chassidus means what's the essence of Chassidus? What's the essence of Chassidus all about? What's the whole Inyan? And you can see he writes it here to Bni Yakiri Yishya Makalasi Hatznua Vakvuri Tiz Baruchu. Okay, so he's writing it to the Frierdiker Rebbe and to his wife, which means that it's shaykh to everybody, essentially, and also to his grandchildren and so on. Okay, so granddaughters actually. So the kalam ba'ad whatever kol lechai. I don't know what the Rosh Hashanah is in any event. We're not going to learn the whole letter because there's parts in between where he gives the Frierdiker Rebbe a bit of musar, which we're not going to learn, but as we'll see. All right, so you write to me to ask me, what inyonim are the mahus inyan chassidus, or mahus inyan chassidus? What are the inyonim to focus on? What's the mahus of chassidus? What's chassidus all about? Everybody's asking about it, and so on. Beginning of your question was, what is Chassidus all about? And what was the chidush? What was new about Chassidus that wasn't found in Torah and in the writings of Chachamim prior to Chassidus? I never heard such a question. I didn't hear such a thing. I didn't see it written. In the Ksovim, he goes on to say, in the Ksovim which are in his possession, the Ksovim of the Rabbeim, and so on, and even the Ksovim of the Chassidim, he never saw such a question asked before. We can skip the brackets. Until I heard such a question, believe me, such a question never arose in my mind. I always put in a tremendous amount of effort to understand the depths of these inyonim. And with Hashem's help, I found what I found. Okay. If I had to learn a thing once, or I had to learn it twice, or I had to go over it and over again until I got it. Maybe sometimes I had to go into this inyan a number of different times in order to be able to understand it. Ole Yagea B'Yoser, Akol Kfi Ratzon Hashem, or to put in tremendous effort, everything according to the Ratzon Hashem. If you want to understand, you will. Sof kol sof. Ma'olam lo asiti cheshbon b'nafshi. I never made any kind of calculation as to with my own neshama. Oh, that works better. Cheshbon b'nafshi. Ma'ani oise. What am I doing? B'ma'ani oisek. And what am I up to? Like what's this that I'm busy with? What is Chassidus? In other words, he never asked the question of himself, what am I doing in Chassidus? What he's trying to say, obviously, is, I don't know what drove you to ask this question, but Pshitus, we learn Chassidus because it's Torah Hashem, right? As he goes on to say. Ani oisek b'divrei Elokim Chaim. I'm busy with divrei Elokim Chaim, with learning Chassidus. What I have to start making all kinds of cheshbonos. What exactly Chassidus is all about. And when I had more koyach, he actually writes from Menton. Menton was a place in France, which I'm sure Mrs. Wolf knows well. Menton was a place in France where the
vacation place.
Huh?
A vacation place, a resort.
Yeah, right. Menton in France, where they used to have, and then probably still have, all kinds of healing spas and baths and things like that the Rebbe Rashab had to go to for his health, to improve his health. And he wrote this letter from there. In any event, when I did have more koyach, his amatz b'miktsas al kopanim, I put some.
If he says his amatz b'miktsas, what's left for us?
All right, everyone according to his shiur. Not everyone has the same shiur. Obviously, the hisamatzti of the Rebbe Rashab is not the hisamatzti of not the F kind of effort we put in, unfortunately, but that's the truth. We need to put in more effort, but Lamaisa probably we don't. Yeah. So. And his intention was to daven and with the Chassidus that he learned. When he received from the Rebbe Maharash, kama itim, on a number of occasions, kimat b'chol shavua, every week, his amatztali hispalel b'Chassidus sheshamanu b'Shabbos Kodesh. Made the effort to daven with the Chassidus that he heard on Shabbos. The Rebbe Maharash would say, Chassidus on Shabbos, he was the first one really to start the inyan of Hemshechim. And he would say Hemshech, in other words, there was a certain theme that he would carry on for several Maimorim over several Shabbosim, and tied usually to the Parshas HaShavua, but the main content was a certain theme that he was exploring and examining and darshaning and so on. So anyway, he davened with these Maimorim that he learned from the Rebbe Maharash, his father. And what brought forth the avoda bepoil. Okay, I'm not going to go into all of this over here because he starts to get a little bit sharp with the Friedrich Rebbe. I think, and we could do it if you want. I mean, but it does go on for 3 pages, so it will make it a little bit long. But in any event, so it's like what's pushing us to go into this Chakira? What's Chassidus all about? Was felt, was ain't uns, what's missing and what's bothering us? As medaf as kumen to the Chakira, that we have to come to such an examination, like what's Chassidus all about. Leida etzem husa Chassidus mahi, to know what the essence of Chassidus is. Allah tshuva pshutihi, isn't it a simple answer? Torah selukimi, it's Abish's Torah. Chelimi paradise a Torah. It's part of paradise. He knows sendos lanu yediya v'hasog ve'elokus. It gives us knowledge and a grasp of elokus. Say again.
Can I ask you a question? About what Chassidus is, wasn't that dealt with in the time of the Alter Rebbe? Because the Alter Rebbe had explained it to everybody back then.
Well, he's asking a different kind of a thing. Yes, we know what Chassidus is in terms of what that is Pnimius Torah and so on and so forth. The question is, what was the Frierdiker Rebbe after over here? What was he looking for? What's the mahus in Chassidus? And he explains it later, and the Rebbe picks this up in Yonesh Torahs Chassidus. He explains that, and this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe obviously was looking for, where it comes from. Like, what's the makor of Chassidus? The makor of Chassidus is not the Baal Shem Tov. The makor of Chassidus is not Achia Shiloini. The makor of Chassidus, as he'll explain, is Pnimis of Keser. That's where it comes from, right? In other words, it's the highest possible madrega that could possibly be, which becomes revealed through the Rebbeim. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe was kind of asking. What's the madrega? That seems to me
the
that
spiritual source of Chassidus.
Say again?
The spiritual source of Chassidus.
Yeah. So again, V'im leida, and if we want to know emitis pu'ulas b'nefesh ha'oisek ba, what's the effect in the neshama of a person? Shtei tshuvas b'davar. There are two answers to this of what the effect of Chassidus is. Oh, I missed out a couple of lines over here. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
No, it's important. This is dafka important. Yeah.
And
Pnimius HaTorah, the Indian of Chassidus is Pnimius HaTorah. Hanasina hanitna lanu mimal, which was given to us from above, milamayla. La'atik yomin itmar, and this refers to atik yomin. So this is a very important point over here. La'atik yomin itmar is explaining that the whole Indian that he's referring to is atik, and not just atik. He'll explain a little bit later on, pnimius atik. Right? Pnimius atik. He's going to explain that soon. In any event, and if we want to know what the effect is on a person who is Harav in Chassidus, who puts his effort in and he learns and he studies and he davens with it and so on and so forth. Shtei tshuvas b'davar. There's two answers. Aleph, hamitis pu'ula says askus azois anu rechokim mimeno. The true pu'ula, the true effect on the neshama, we're far from understanding it, and we're far from actually having the true effect on ourselves. Betachlis, not just far, but far betachlis. And he says one of these days he's going to explain to the Frierdiker Rebbe why we're so far away. Umasha aleinu, but nevertheless, what's upon us? In that bracket, he explains that. I'll explain to you one day. Masha aleinu l'hishtadel. I'm sorry, here the book is a bit crooked. L'hishtadel b'limud hazeh. What we have to make an effort in this is, in other words, in the Indian of learning Chassidus, shetachis halimud tzarich lios amanas la'asos. The purpose of learning is to bring it out bepoil, to do something with it. Who live all Yeshua's b'nafshenu b'yadiyah v'hasoga zois, is to bring about Yeshua's salvation in our neshama through learning this Torah. Kashen is boinen bazeh, when we actually contemplate and think through what it is that we're learning. And he goes on to explain a little bit further. But he says now he starts like this. And he says, we could finish this paragraph if you want to finish the paragraph. It's the next two paragraphs which are really where he starts to give it to the Frierdiker Rebbe a little bit. You know, maybe the reason that you're asking is because you want to know about the yoker of Chassidus, the Reichkeit of Chassidus. In other words, you want to be able to evaluate it and so on and so forth. And it's and this, he says, that's not a fair question. That's not a question that we ask, and just ignore it. We can continue with this paragraph if you don't mind staying a little bit longer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Return loima, in other words, the hasoga and the hisboinenus in the inyonim. Return loima b'ha inyan she'anu masigim be'elokus. In this matter in which we masig elokus ala de idea zois through this yediyah, through the yediyah of Chassidus, the yediyah that Chassidus gives us by studying the Maimorim and so on and so forth. But dafka kashen hisboinen, and dafka when we start to be misboinen, lo b'halimud v'hayediyah lavad. Being misboinen not only in the understanding of the Indian, in the learning of it, but how we're going to bring it into poil. That's the issue here, right? The issue is to bring it into poil. Now he explains a very nice Indian, the difference between learning and hisbonenus in the next couple of lines. The difference between the avoid of Chassidus, the hisbonenus of Chassidus, and the limud of Chassidus. The difference between the two is the bahalimud. When we learn in Chassidus, is gabrus hasichli yoser. So then you have the seichel is working, and you're thinking, you're trying to understand, you're thinking it through, and you put it in your conceptual framework, and so on and so forth. That's the inyan of the learning part of it. But in his boinanus, it's a whole different getter. Ubi his boinanus, but when a person is doing his boinanus, then what's the ikar? His gabrus ha'eloki yoser. What overcomes and what stands out and what the purpose is much more his gabrus, how do you say his gabrus? Like beer is to like raise the volume, so to speak, of the eloki yoser, right? The
Dominating.
The predominance of the inyan eloki. It's not the inyonim which are important; it's the elokus in it. That's the ikar during his boinanus. Even though it's true that when he's learning, he's also learning an inyan eloki, right? He knows that he's learning an inyan eloki. It's not just seichel and nushi, right? It's not just human intellect. It's not like musar, which is basically human intellect, as the Alter Rebbe says in Hagdoma to Tanya this morning, Chitas. It's not just human intellect based on human assumptions and so on and so forth, and perhaps various fashions and fads. We're not talking about that. It's inyan eloki, no question about it. Even when you're learning, he knows that he's learning an inyan eloki. It's not just a davar sichli; it's an inyan eloki. Just like when we're learning Torah in general, a person has to know he's learning the chokhmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not. This is not. Mathematics or physics or psychology. He's learning chokhmah shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yoser, and this is even more so, belimit pnimiyas HaTorah, when a person is learning the inyan in pnimiyas HaTorah, shakavona zu tzarich lios behelem benafshoy, that this intention, i.e., that he knows that he's learning seichel chokhmah elokis, has to be behelem benafshoy tomid. It always has to be like in the back of his mind, so to speak, in his subconscious, that he's learning an inyan eloki, he's learning divrei elokim chaim, he's learning chokhmah shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tomid, all the time, ba'eis halimud, all the time that he's learning. And there's various inyonim that are spoken about, and actually in the derech halimud, that a person should stop every now and then when he's learning. It actually says every hour, but it doesn't mean literally every hour. It just means over every period of time when a person is learning, and think about the fact that this is the Eibish's story that he's learning. It's not just stam divrei chokhmah. It's not divrei gemara. It's not just stam divrei halacha. This is the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're learning, right? Okay. So that's what a person has to do all the time, bring it to the front of his mind, but it always has to be in the back of his mind. But that's even when you're learning. But when a person is busy in the middle of his boinanus, he has to grasp it well. In other words, the seichel part of it he has to know as well. Nevertheless, at the time that a person is actually learning, that's the time of his gabrus hegesh hasichli. That's when the seichel is misgaber. The seichel's on top. The seichel is running the show, so to speak, because you're trying to understand. But when a person is being misboinen in the time of avoida, his gabrush hegesh eloki. The ikka hegesh is the hegesh eloki and not the hegesh hasichli. It's not the intellectual component, but the elokus, the attachment to elokus that is aroused when a person is being misboinen. That should be the ikar focus. As is written in Kuntreis Atfila, the Rebbe Rashab explains this in a great arichus. So he says, nargish, and then we can feel ilui v'yoker elokus. We can feel the loftiness and the cherishedness. I don't know if there's such a word, but how cherished and how valuable it is to have a kesher to the Eibush, a kesher to elokus. Ilui v'yoker elokus. that draws our neshamas to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Davka Boy. And our entire chayfetz, our inner desire and our ratzoin, outer desire, Yurak Boy Yisborach, should only be for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything that we do. And then the person's avodah, the entire day will be involved with Torah mitzvahs because he's always got this concept in mind. Whatever it is that he does, and he's going to be involved in the learning that he did in the morning. His boinus becomes part of his daily ritual, part of his daily life, even if he's doing mundane things. As actually there are many stories about Nistarim that would be doing, there was a certain Nistar, I forget his name now, I think it was the Rebbe Schuster, I think that's what he was, what his name was, when he would sew, he was a shoemaker, right? So when he would fix shoes, and he would, put the threads through shoes, it says about Chanoich as well, actually, that he was also a shoemaker, and he would also have kavonas. But anyway, this Rebbe Leib would have kavonas to be masak in the person's neshama as every stitch that he put through, he was mechaber that neshama to elokus, right? So for big tzaddikim and so on, this was kol hayoim. Even while he was fixing shoes, he had these kavonas. V'zeh kol ratzoinoi, and this is the person's ratzon only rak elokus v'inyon elokus, to be attached to the Eibishter in yonim of elokus, etc. There's a number of different details, and there's a number of different ways of serving Hashem. Whether we're talking about revealing the koyches of the nefesh elokis, or whether we're talking about refining and purifying the nefesh bahamas, as explained in Divrei Elokim Chaim in Chassidus in a number of different places. But the ikar kavona is b'hizgalus that these inyonim should be b'hizgalus. In other words, that elokus should be revealed in a certain, at least each according to his own abilities, and it should be done in a way that's that reveals his koyches. Explains. Bechinus hizgalus ein kavonasi raka avoida b'hizgalus aleif. Shouldn't only be the misgala in his heart. In other words, in bepnimius. Kima kavona avoida she nira v'nigla b'limudazeh. It should affect a person in a way that everyone can see that he's affected by what he learns. He's a changed person. He's a new person. When he gets up from learning a Ma'ameh Chassidus in the morning, he should be a new person. That's the effect of the learning. As he explains, Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, and he says over there, it brings a person to a life sholem. Shehu ha'ikar. That's the ikar, says the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, that it brings to a life sholem. In other words, the person becomes a different person, basically. It brings to a life sholem. We go in with a broken heart, we come in with a life sholem, so to speak. And thus, all of us are we need to, and we're obligated to seek out and to demand mi'itanu from ourselves. Just what we said above is what we have to demand from ourselves. And when we purify ourselves and refine ourselves sufficiently, not only the nefesh but the guf as well, through avodah in the way that we just mentioned, then we'll come to the proper effect of the limud on us, that it should really change a person completely. Okay, so there were two things that he said that he said was the effects of learning. The first one is that it changes us completely, and it brings us into a new matzav. V'habais, what's the second inyan? There's a second aspect of the Pu'ula of Chassidus is that it comes about automatically. You don't have to seek it. You don't have to. It comes about automatically. Through properly delving into this limud and learning it aliba de nafshe, after the refinement which we expressed above, In other words, the highest madregas in Chassidus, the highest madregas of the result of learning Chassidus will be given to a person automatically once he does the avodah that we mentioned in the first part of this, right? They come automatically. And therefore, we don't have to look into what the pula is. The pula will come. Do what you have to do, and the pula will come. When you work on it, the pula will come. This is when it gets into a little bit of Musar. It seems to me, the reason that you're going into the whole Hakira, because he's looking as Mont Bazich, he's demanding from himself, what's the Reichkeit from Chassidus? In other words, what's the richness, in other words, what's the comparative value, so to speak, of Chassidus compared with everything else? Shezeh maybe his askus bazeh, because he thinks that it's such a valuable thing, therefore you're going to occupy yourself. But the point would be in other words, to become a masculine and to become a someone with knowledge and to become smart and to be regarded as a chochem and so on and so forth. In other words, not so much lishmo. And he goes on to say, and the reason that people are asking this question is because they're not really giving over to Chassidus properly, right? Because if given over to Chassidus properly, this question would never arise in a person's mind. All right, so we're going to skip this paragraph, and you can, of course, do it again on your own. And then he also goes on to talk about, in the next paragraph, the importance of his vows, chaverim, in other words, for bringing together with chaverim and so on, which in this age of Corona is sometimes a little more difficult, but whatever. In any event, now is when he starts to actually give the analysis that we want to get to. Hina begufa etzma inyan lefi dati, the guf and the etzma inyan of Chassidus, according to the Rebbe Rashab's understanding, is a Chassidus hiyadia amuka be'elokus, is deep understanding in inyonim in elokus mahamadregas atachtoinos, from the lowest madregas at imka madregas hayoser elyonos to the depths of the highest possible madregas, and ba'omer mahadregas atachtoinos. And when saying it's Bo'amri, when I said the Madregas Atachtoinos, Yikmo Shamati Pam, Asher Binyonim Hamurgolim B'Chassidus, when I mean the low Madregas, I'm talking about the things that are always spoken about in Chassidus, right? Things that everybody's used to, and not the Chidushim in Chassidus, not the depths of Inyonim. When Nar Cotton Medaber Behem, even children speak about these things and they know about them. But nevertheless, Yesh Bahem Haskolas Hamukois. There's tremendous depth even in those things that everybody talks about and everybody, so to speak, knows about. And you have to put in tremendous effort to really understand what they're all about, to understand the truth thereof. And sometimes, in order to understand the simple things, needs more effort and more time than the inyonim hagavoyim, than the lofty inyonim. Because in the lofty inyonim, shabahem nirigasha haskola, because in those inyonim, the high lofty inyonim, you understand the haskola like sticks out. It's very prominent, and therefore we can feel it more. We nirigasha haskola yoyse. And these inyonim, very lofty inyonim, speak about things in a much more mufshat, in a much more abstract way. And since they're more abstract, there's less avoida involved. The more abstract something is, the less avoida one is able to do with this particular inyan. The more abstract it is, the less it's shaykh to changing our lives on a daily basis, right? Become just mamash inyonim mufshatim. Not so with the inyonim on the lower levels. In other words, inyonim which are, yes, shaykh to avoida and a shaykh to all of us. For example, talking about inyonim in the lower three worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, Ukahai Governor, and so on. Shehadiburim Bahem, that regarding these inyonim, when it's spoken about in Chassidus, Bahal Bosha, they come about Bahal Bosha. And in other words, it's the inyonim of Elokus in the lower world of Bahal Bosha. They're mlubash, they're covered over with garments, the garments of Teva, or the garments of things that we understand, or at least we think we understand and we used to. Bahal Bosha, Va'ena Sichli Nirgash, and you don't feel a seichel, therefore, so much in them because they come about in inyonim that are more familiar to us from the chitzonias and not the pnimis aseichel.
Can I ask you, would you say ein oid milvada, for example, is inyan pashut?
That's a good question.
What does it mean by, I would think things that kids talk, like there's only Hashem, ein oid milvada. It sounds like pashut, but really to get it.
Yeah.
Would that be an example?
It could be one of the examples. I was thinking more about the inyonim of when talking about the inyonim in Olam Yetziro, Erma Bria, and so on and so forth. When you're talking about spheroids in a certain surah, and those kinds of things in Chassidus, you have to dig deeper to understand the pnimis inyan there. Masha Enkain inyonim, when you're talking about inyonim in Olam Atzilus and Lamalam Olam Atzilus, that's
Well, he's saying things that kids know. He says things that now Kotan medaber bohem.
Yeah, so maybe Ein Od Milvado is one of them. Halavai.
That's a hard concept.
Ein Od Milvado, for sure. Yeah.
But it's something that kids do say, that there is only Hashem.
Yeah.
Well, what would be too high then?
Well, let's say in Yonim, not too high, but in Yonim, let's say in the Tzimtzum, or in Yonim in the Orein Sof before the Tzimtzum, the Inyan of the Kav, the Rishimu, like all these in Yonim are very lofty in Yonim, but they're not really shaykh to avoid it. What's a Tzimtzum shaykh?
So why are they there for us? Like, what's the point? It seems like it does something for us. Like, you just get higher to understanding what Hashem isn't, maybe, but seems like it does something. And
well, I mean, there's definitely, he's not saying that we shouldn't learn it,
There must be a reason for
Chassidus is full of these in Yonim. Some of the Ikar Chidushim in Chassidus or Dafkan was high in Yonim. But what he's saying is that they're not so shaykh to avoid it. They're not so shaykh to avoid it. But what would be your avoider in Tzimtzum? There's not shaykh to avoid it so much.
Well, then what's it for? It seems like
because we have to understand the whole procedure, like how the whole procedure. I mean, it's important understanding that ki karav elecha dava moed, right? The truth is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very close to you. The tzimtzum is not really a tzimtzum; it's only a tzimtzum b'chitonius. As we just said, as Mrs. Wolf just said, ein od milvado is all the time, like tzimtzum or no tzimtzum, right? There's ein od milvado. So it's important to understand these things, and it's a big avoider to try and understand everything, in the entire Seder Shtalshlus from top to bottom. But it's not necessarily, those higher madregas are not necessarily shaykh to his boinus in tefillah. In his boinus in tefillah, particularly Psukei de Zimra, we're looking at Matzmiya chatzil behema, growing the grass for an animal to eat. In other words, lower madregas of inyonim, and so on. His bonus in tefillah is dafka in inyonim that are sort of within our grasp, and therefore they can change your life on a daily basis. Okay. But nevertheless, one has to put in a tremendous amount of effort because they covered over them melubash in inyonim of the bria, and therefore tzrichim or al korchach tzrichim yagia leida echuma. Hey, we have to put in a tremendous amount of effort to know exactly what they're all about. All these inyonim on the lower madregas, masha'enka, and on the higher madregas, it's only seichel, right? The seichel sticks out. It's boilate. It's prominent. We understand that this is an Indian sichli. It's an abstract concept, and we can understand it. Perhaps let's say the tzimtzum. In any event,
I didn't know that you could be differentiating what to learn, what not to learn, and when, and stuff like that.
Well, that depends, I think, on the person and what their mashpia says, and where they're holding and so on. But that's best discussed with one's mashpia, it would seem to me. Anyway, so he was talking about before, we were talking about madregas tatoinus and madregas elyoinus, right? And all of those inyonim, even Madregas Elyonis, it has to be a dia, but derech hasoga v'tfisa dafka. You have to understand it. You have to grasp what's going on. It shouldn't just be on faith like it is by perhaps by Polish Chassidim, which he mentioned in the previous paragraph. That they just take everything on emuna, and they don't. There's no horavanya. There's no eseka Chassidus. There's no putting your effort into learning and understanding and so on.
You know what? It seems to me like even if you're learning high things about spirits, if it's the Rebbe's memory, the Rebbe always brings it down for you. Abstract concept.
It's true. It's true. The Rebbe does bring it down. Nevertheless, the Rebbe doesn't do the avoida for you. Like your avoida in davening, in other words, your self-transformation, so to speak, that can be done in Lamala, but that's not the way it's supposed to be done. We're supposed to do that transformation. There was a Verbringen yesterday in Free. Rabbi Notik told over a story about Rebendel Futafas when he was in prison. He was visited by one of the other Hasidim. This other Chassid had a sort of a sharp, bit of a sharp tongue. So I said to Rebendel apparently at Verbringens used to drink a lot of alcohol, but at this point in time he was in prison. So this Chassid said to Rebendel, I think that the reason that you're in prison is because the amount of alcohol you drank is not commensurate. It doesn't measure up with the amount of tears you shed during Kriya Shema Lamita. Right? In other words, you drank much more than your Kriya Shema Lamita. So, or one of two things: or you have to improve your Kriya Shema Lamita and cry the number of tears that you're going to drink, or you have to drink less. That's one of the two. And I don't think we're talking about the second alternative, we're talking about the first. You have to cry more. That's the in Kriya Shema Lamita. That's avoida. There's avoida. It's a cheshbon hanefesh and a cheshbon haday. And what did I actually do? Did I change? Was I different today than I was yesterday? Am I going to be different tomorrow than I was today? And then you leave it. Tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow you wake up, it's a new day. It's a new day. I'm a new person. It's a new derech in avoida, and so on and so forth. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Anyway, in other words, not to dwell on, to dwell on the day, one thing. To dwell on the past, and not so much a Chassidish derech, too much. That's like the Musadniks always trying to change the past. Chassidim trying to change the future a little bit, but from the present, obviously. In any event. So again, there's the inyan of B'derech HaSoga. A person has to understand these inyanim. Shemasika inyan. He grasps Sha'inyan Kahu, that's the way it is. That's the way it really is. He understands it. He understands it. He's got the whole system in my rechet and so on. He understands it well. It fits in. Lo rak b'derech Kabbalah, not just in a way of being makabel these inyonim from the Rebbe or from the Rebbeim. Kim b'hasoga davka, a person has to understand it for himself. Shemasik shekainu, he has to understand. He himself has to understand that that's the way it is. She herself has to understand that's the way it is. Obviously, at the beginning of when it's beginning to learn, it's b'derech Kabbalah k'yadua. That has to be b'derech Kabbalah. That has to be in a way of just receiving it and not really necessarily understanding. But even so, he has to try and understand and grasp what it is that he's learning. Lo yachdo leida ulahasig amitas ha'inyan eichu mahu. He's not going to get to the depths of this inyan that is being masig. It's obviously not possible to get to the depths of it unless you've learned a lot and you understand much more. Right? Someone at the beginning of the path is obviously not going to be able to understand someone who's much more advanced. Then, then when a person is more advanced, he can get to the depth of the hasoga. But nevertheless, he has to understand at least by way of masholim and by way of what the words mean and what the Rebbe is actually saying. Just reading the words it's not good enough. You can just put a Tanya under your pillow and go to sleep at night. That's not the point, right? The point is to understand what it says, at least as far as possible. And every year we learn Tanya. Every year we learn new chidushim and new inyonim and new applications and new avoida from the Chassidus that we learn. In any event, it has to be grasped in his brain, her brain, bahanocha toiva, and grasped bahanocha toiva, meaning clearly, right? It has to be sit in your brain well. Es legt sich up, the Indian good. The Indian like rests well with you. In other words, it's grasped. You understand. It's not something that's hovering above your head. Obazeh yasik is elokus, and in this way he's going to grasp elokus. Because these are two inyonim. There's the inyan eloki, the concept, va elokus, and the godliness. They're not the same thing. There's a concept which contains, so to speak, the godliness, the kli, so to speak, and then there is the elokus. Now he explains this is a beautiful way of explaining it. It's just like it's very gishmak. I mean, this in itself is his boinus, what he's about to say. Come on, he gives an example of this, of the difference between the inyan eloki and the elokus. Right? What's the difference? U'kamo vi is chochma l'mayla. How is chochma when it is l'mayla? That's the inyan eloki. V is bina l'mayla. What is bina when it's up in olam atzilus or whatever? V is bina. Like, what's chochma? What's bina? Right? But when you come to the elokus, V is elokus, there is in chochma, there is chochma. How's elokus when he's manifested in chochma? How's the Eibishter when he's manifested in chochma? How's the Eibishter when he's manifested in bina? Wie is elokus, wer is in bina? Where is bina? So there's the inyan eloki, the kli, so to speak, the concept, the idea, and then there's the elokus as it is in chochma. What's chochma and what's elokus when it's in chochma? These are two inyonim that need to be clearly understood. Bakol Hashem Echad, obviously it's all one. Eibishter elokus is chochma, when he's bina, the Eibishter is chochma, is bina. Wie is dos in madregas a chochma, and wie is dos in madregas a bina, and how it is in chochma, how it is in bina, etc., etc. Everybody understands that it's not two inyonim, it's not two Eibishters, but it's two ways of looking at things. What's the concept, and how's elokus when it's in that concept? That's the pnimis of the Inyan. Kahai Gavna, b'chol ha'sfiros, b'chol ha'olamas. So too, in all the spheres, all the olamas, the same concept, the same boinus. The boinus in learning is to understand what chochma is, or what atzilus is, or what olam abriya is, or what bina is, and so on. That's in learning. But in his boinus, understand vi is elokus in olam atzilus. How is elokus manifested in atzilus? How is it different from the world of Bria? How is it different from Olam Ein Sof? How is it different from whatever, right? How is Chochma different from Bina? How is Bina different from Chochma? And so on and so forth. How is Elokus when it's in Chochma different from Elokus the way it is manifested in Bina? And those in Yonim. Okay. He fills all the worlds and he envelops and surrounds all the worlds, etc. Also shaykh in the same way. In other words, you were trying to understand what's Mamalek Kol Almin, and Vizalokus in where it is bebechinas Mamalek Kol Almin. Vizalokus where it is bebechinas Sovi Kol Almin. Hasoga bazeh inyan of Mamalek Kol Almin. The hasoga, as he just says it, is the inyan of Mamalek Kol Almin. The inyan hasovi Kol or the inyan hasovi Kol Almin. Hainu. Vos is Mamalek Kol Almin, Vos is Sovi Kol Almin. The Prata and Yonim Bazeh, we have to understand what they are. Mamalek Kol Almin, Sovi Kol Almin, etc. That's the limud, that's the seichel. But when it comes to these boinanus, Vi is elokus, where is Mamalek Kol Almin? How is the Eibishter in the oifen of Mamalek Kol Almin? How is the Eibishter in the oifen of Sovi? And Vi is elokus, where is Sovi Kol Almin? Through the inyan, he comes to the grasp of the elokus itself. Through the inyan of elokus, he comes to be able to grasp what elokus is when it's in that inyan. And it's hasoga. You can understand it. You can explain it. You can explain it to somebody else. That means you've grasped it properly. But from that, that's the handle to be able to get to via elokus in their inyan. Okay. Umuvan shekol zehu bedakus hasoga nit in Leipzig, in Leibniz, not in heavy gloves or Leipzig. I think is it boots or gloves?
I
Leipzig,
don't know. It's not gloves.
huh?
It's not gloves.
I think it's heavy boots. You know, when you go out in the mud and the snow, I think it's called
Lopsi, yes. You call
Lopsi.
it Lopsi, yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's they would say. I remember hearing the expression in Krachabar a number of times from them. They would say Leipzig. I don't know if it's maybe anyway, whatever it is. It's actually there's a footnote here that tells you what it is. Menalim
Yeah,
gasim
Minalayim Gasim Asim
yeah,
Kilatailan, yeah. It's shoes.
there you are. Yeah, it's shoes made from bark or wood of trees, which are very like coarse shoes, so to speak. All right. So in other words, you have to take the inyonim bedakus and not begasus.
I didn't quite understand the difference between the two things. Can you just bring it down more?
One is more the description, and one is what's inside.
The inyan itself, right?
Like if you think of
one is describing, let's say, Mamalik Kolomin,
okay.
and one is the Elikus within Mamalik Kolomin. What kind of godliness is
That's
there?
just like I'm thinking about it or trying to apply it or what? Like
there's two different inyonim. There's two different inyonim here. You can describe the inyan of Elokus, let's say Mamalikol Almin, is describing and explaining what the whole inyan of Mamalikol Almin is, why it's different from Sovikol Almin, in what way it's different, what's the Madrega when it's a Mamalikol, what Madrega is not in Mamalik, and it's a whole open of understanding the concept. It's a conceptual chakira, right? But when it comes to the Elokus, via is Mamalekol Almin, when I'm talking about Elokus, that's the Bechina of Mamalekol Almin, what inyan am I talking? What am I talking about over here? How is the Hakadosh Baruch Hu when he is Bebechinas Mamalekol Almin? And how's that shaykh to my avoida? How's that shaykh to my
Manavoida.
yeah, my avoida, my davening, v'chulu, yeah.
is that something spelled out in learning the Chassidus, or is it something you have to?
I don't think it's spelled out so much. I mean, in Kuntras Tefillah, in Kuntras Avoida, he does go into it a little bit more. Kuntras Avoida, I mean, he does go into it more. But let's put it this way. I would say, and I'm going out on a bit of a limb here because I don't recall seeing this anywhere. When you're trying to understand an inyan, you may yagaya your seichel, right? You're using your brain to understand it. It's all right, all brain work.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about the inyan in avoida, then it's neshama work. Like, how does my neshama relate to the inyan of Elokus as a bechinas mamalek almin or as bechinas soiva almin? It's more of a neshama inyan. It's not a brain inyan. It's not a kop inyan. Yes, I would say that's the.
I don't know. Like, how do you know how to do it, and if you're really doing it, or you're just thinking you're doing it, or?
It's kedai to learn Kuntras Avoida because he does explain it quite a bit over there. Kuntras Avoida. All right, let's continue. All right. Omnam. However, Gamma Soga, he kilu roya. The Soga has to be such that he can see it, right? He's going to explain what he means by this. When you see something in your mind's eye, so to speak, right? When you see something in your mind's eye, there's two inyonim over there. Aleph, one inyan is mashnis amet etzlo ha'inyan. You feel the truth of the inyan. It like fits into the whole system, and you feel the truth. You understand what this inyan is. It's nisames etzlo. You can feel the emes of the inyan. You see that this is in fact the case. This is the way it is. This is the truth. That's the first inyan. Nisames etzlo. Habeis mashe roes inyan bo'efan achem ek moshe hisik koidim. You start to see the inyan in a way that you didn't quite grasp it when you understood it before. Now, let's just go a little bit further, and he explains what he means. You do a be'inyan shmiya v're'iyah, as we know the difference between hearing something and seeing something. Sheber'iyah sadavar, that when you see something, zeter gor anders wir hotos verstanden. When you actually see it, it's very different from, in other words, when you actually experience it, it's very different from the way you thought it was. When you're thinking about someone, let's say someone describes to you, I don't know, a certain place that you've never seen before. When you actually go there and you actually experience it, the description doesn't quite fit in every detail, because you can experience it in a much deeper way, in a much more, even though the description was a true description, nevertheless, your experiences and your interpretation and your understanding are just not going to be the same as your experiencing. Okay. And what effect does this have? As he'll explain, how it becomes part of your neshama is completely different from the way it was before. Before you were just understanding something as a concept, it was conceptual, right? But now it becomes part of you. It becomes part of your own metzius. All right, so these two things, you have these two things in a concept, grasped in a concept. Not only is the inyan understood by him to be true and he grasps the truth thereof, Yesh Khan, there's more than that. Yesh Khan b'hasoga b'hasoga, there is in this concept also the riacha. Sorry, die Reichkeit von Re'iyah. You have, I'm sorry.
So one is Shmiya and one is Re'iyah, Mo.
Yeah, right. One's Shmiya, one's Re'iyah, exactly. Right? You have the Reichkeit von Re'iyah. You actually experience it directly. Shmiya, you heard about it. Re'iyah, you actually see the thing itself. That's right.
The connect.
Right. R'tzayna loymar shegam ba'asoga yesh hergesh re'iyah. That even in Asoga, you can have the concept of, even in something that's shaykh to thought, which is l'chayra shmiya, you can have the hergesh re'iyah, you can sort of feel it in existence. You can feel its existence. K'mo hakora, just like hakora, shu eina re'iyah, hakora, recognizing something, is not seeing something, it's a recognition. Nevertheless, mikol makom haru ki'ilu roeh, it's as if, even though you're not actually seeing it, but it's as if you see it, because the recognition of the thing is almost the same as seeing it. In other words, recognizing a thing means that you have it in you already, and then you're just matching what's inside to what you see on the outside. So therefore, it's ki'ilu roeh, right? Ki'ilu roeh. Okay. Mo kana soga zois, hi ki'ilu roeh. It's as if the person is seeing something. We'll move on. And we can understand that recognizing an inyan is also transcends the concept of hasoga. And malas re'iyah is even more than that, right? It's more than the recognition even. Both Hakora and Re'iyah, as the inyan of Re'iyah, Shegama Soga Amiti is Bazeh, he ki'ilu roeh, it's as if he sees the thing. And why? Because it comes from this inyan of your limud, it's shaykh to the inyan of Chokhmah, and since Chokhmah is the inyan of Re'iyah, right? Therefore, it comes out as a bechina of Re'iyah. In other words, the grasping the mahusa inyan is an inyan of re'iyah because it's shaykh to chokhmah. It's tafka chokhmah inyan rather than a bina inyan. Bina inyan is the inyan of shmiya. That's the inyan of hasoga, of havona v'hasoga. That's bina. But here we get into a deeper level, the inyan of chokhmah. Alefcha chokhmah. I will teach you chokhmah. But it's different from the inyan of Alef Chabina. Alef Chabina, I will teach you Bina, means it's a conceptual understanding. Alef Chokhmah is an experiential understanding. In other words, somehow contacting the inyan b'pnimius and seeing it in your mind's eye in front of you, so to speak. Okay. So even so what happened?
Like Bina's really bringing it down more.
Yeah, Bina brings it down more, but the experience of the things in Chokhmah. Bina is mirachoik, right? It's a little bit of a distance between the two. Okay. How are we doing for time? We've been going over time already? All right.
Time in this class.
Even Hasoga becomes Chokhmah, becomes part of Re'iyah. And the point is to bring this grasp down into the world. To bring it down into this world properly in a way that it can be understood, that can only really be done by a Rebbe, by a Neshama Vatzilus. That can only really be done by a Rebbe. Chassidus, he Tal Torah. Chassidus is Tal Torah. In other words, that's what's the meaning of Tal Torah. Tal Torah is what wakes you up from being dead, right? Tal Torah Mechayehu, the Indian of Tal in Torah is the Indian of Tchias HaMeisim. As he goes on to say. Yeah, Amru, Amru, this is regarding this, the Chachomim said, whenever a person occupies himself with the dew of Torah, so to speak, the dew of Torah brings it back to life. So, Rashum al Abichel Cotton, and this is written in, we're going to skip a little bit over here. It's written in a small, in a Bichel, notes from the Rebbeim. And at first he thought it was from the Mittler Rebbe, then he comes to the conclusion that it's actually from the Tzemach Tzedek, and so on. And therefore, someone who delves into these things, someone who finds them, finds life. And he lives forever. What does it mean? He'll see Gan Eden when he's alive. Which means He's going to delight in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ba'avoda shebelev, Indian of Tefillah, v'chulu.
Ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I really get this. So this whole description of Riyah and Shmiya, Chachma and Bina, is this just talking about Chassidus as a seichel and not as the elokus, like the paragraphs above?
No,
no,
the difference between them is the difference in learning the Inyan and the experience of the Elokus. The difference, the learning of the Inyan, that's a Bina Inyan, right? Which you have to have. But the grasp of Elokus, so to speak, that's a Chochma Inyan.
But were you talking above about the Elokus in it, as opposed to the concept of
right.
These two tie-in.
Right. Yeah, okay, now we get to the Inyan that the Rebbe, one of the Inyanim that the Rebbe actually brings in Limud Teres HaChasidah, in Yonash Teres HaChasidus, which he quotes from here. Omnam kein hu gam emitis pu'ulas halimud hazeh lefi da'ati. And this is in fact the true pu'ula of this limud, and that is vehi sha'koiches yu elokim. A person's koiches become not just koiches of his nefesh, but koiches elokim. You koiches b'metzius aval hema elokim. In other words, what the koiches grasp and what they davuk to is elokus. It's not just that the person becomes a bar seichel, or he becomes a professor of Chassidus, or a professor of Hasidic philosophy, right? Where he might know everything that it says in all of the books of Chassidus, but there's no avoider involved. Right? No. Here, when a person learns and he learns it the way it's supposed to be, and he tries to get to the elokus in the Inyan and not just the seichel, then his koiches become koiches elokim. They become koiches elokim. Ha-seichel va-hasoga hi be'etzem hasoga elokis. The seichel is seichel, but it's seichel eloki. It's godly seichel. In other words, it's on a different madrega. It's not intellectual. It's not professor seichel. This is seichel of an ish kadosh, right? Of a person who's of a holy person. It's a completely different thing. All of the chokhmas which are chokhmas elokim, it's possible to acquire in the nefesh, so to speak. a person, even though he remains a person, he doesn't become a malach yet, right? He's not a malach and he's in a neshama beguf, and so on. Nevertheless, naaseh eloki, naasa eloki, he becomes an inyan eloki. There's an interesting story that I read about Rabbi Steinsaltz, Alav Sholem. His father was not from. His father was actually from Shomer HaTzair, which was in Israel, was probably the most leftist group that there was. They were complete leftists. But he said his father sent him to a frum school. He sent him to a religious, an Orthodox religious Talmud Torah. Why? Because he said he wanted him to be an apikoros and not an amaretz. An apikoros is someone who knows and he rejects it. An amaretz doesn't even know anything. So, but later on, his father became very involved in his project, the Talmud project, and he was very proud of him, and so on and so forth. But in other words, a person can know and become an apikoros, or a person can know and become an ish eloki or an isha elokit, and so on. Completely different thing, right? V'chol ma shemasig, and everything that a person grasps, gam b'inyonim ativim, even inyonim tivim. In other words, to do with teva, to do with the world around us. Einu masig osam letivim. He doesn't grasp them as just natural phenomena. Kiyim elokiyim. He understands and he grasps them as inyonim elokiyim. And there, Masha Kasba Sexual Beinin Chelek Beis, Perigimel, as Alter Rebbe writes there, Ilu Nitna Reshus La'ayin Lirois, if the eye would be given permission to see the Elokos, that's what it would see, right? If it was given permission to see Elokos, it wouldn't just see the external form of the table. It would see the Elokus in the table, the Dvar Hashem Amachayas HaShulchan, right? The Dvar Hashem that's the ikar of the thing, not the chitzoniistic a piece of wood that it really is. V'hainu shahu yuroim, that people will be able to see b'chol davar, in any matter, eich shehu ha'ayin eloki, how that inyan is the ayin eloki. Not that it's just a table, it's just a piece of food or whatever it is. It's an ayin eloki. Kachu kan, so too over here, as far as hasoga and elokus. B'hasoga shemasi kol davar, in the inyonim which he understands, what he grasps is, his intellectual grasp becomes a koach eloki. So when he understands things, he's not just understanding the words, he's not just understanding the concept, he's grasping the elokus in the concept. And therefore everything that he's about and all his actions, even though he does them in a natural kind of a way. In other words, he also gets up and he also does nagelbasa and he also does goes to sleep and eats and does all of those things. Nevertheless, they're not inyonim tivim. Enam tivim kim elokim, they're actually part of his avodas Hashem. How does that happen? His askus amiti. It happens automatically when a person puts his effort into serving the Eibishter properly. His askus amiti. He preoccupies himself with learning and understanding and trying to grasp and trying to connect and so on and so forth. Belimud hazeh, in this limud of Chassidus, and he does it with true. With true understanding and so on. As we explained before, the whole in Chassidus person has to grasp it, he has to understand it, he has to have a proper grasp of what the inyan is. Hasoga muka, and a deep understanding. Hasoga nitfeses bekli hasoga, and something that it's in his brain that he can even explain it to somebody else. He can write about it, he can talk about it, and so on. This includes an inyan of hapshota. Hapshota meaning, this he goes into a little bit of digresses a little bit over here into an inyan, which is very important, but it's not the main thing that he that he's talking about. What's the inyan of hapshota? Hapshota is stripping the inyan of its gashmiustika concepts, of its gashmiustika levushim. It's a process called hafshota. It's a process of bringing something from its gashmiustic state to its conceptual state. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're teaching a child, you want to teach them like 1 + 1 = 2, right? No, that's a concept which is true about any objects, right? Any one object plus another one of the same object makes two of those objects, right? Okay. So let's say you want to teach a child this mathematical formula. It's a very simple formula, but still this mathematical formula. So how do you start? You start with a kid, you bring him an apple and another apple. You have one apple, you have two apples, that's 1 + 1 = 2, right? So 1 apple plus 1 apple equals 2 apples. 1 orange plus 1 orange equals 2. And you go through a number of different instances of 1 pen plus 1 pen equals 2 pens and so on. And you can go through a number of different things until he grasps that 1x plus 1x equals 2x, right? That's just the way it is. Eventually he'll chap that there's a principle behind it. That's the inyan of hafshota, right? To be mafshit, the inyan of gashmius, it doesn't depend on an apple or an orange or a pen or a pencil or whatever it may happen to be. You get to the etzem inyan, the etzem formula, that 1 + 1 = 2, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is.
Hafshata means like to remove oneself from this concrete explanation.
Exactly.
What was that?
To remove to remove oneself from the concrete explanation or example.
There's actually, I don't know if I have it here or it's upstairs. There's actually another letter from also from the Rebbe Rashab, where he speaks about the whole inyan of hafshota and how it works. It's brought in my Morim as well, but an interesting letter from the Rebbe Rashab, where he speaks about this inyan of hafshota. To be mafshit, like for instance, you're looking at a flower, right? You could either see a flower, or you could see the Dvar Hashem, which is machaya, that flower, right? And that's what we're talking about. Hafshota is to get to that inyan. So hasoga includes the inyan of hafshota. Hasoga doesn't only mean grasping the thing as it is on the surface. It also means being able to understand the principle behind it. But even getting to the principle behind it does not necessarily mean the same thing as experiencing it, right? That's just understanding it. It's understanding bebechinas hafshota. It's not understanding it as
It still is seichel.
It's still seichel, right? It's not experience, exactly.
Can we really experience it?
Not yet.
Or is that just, can we only understand it not an experience when Mashiach is revealed, or?
Yeah, he's going to explain it now. Let's just go next few lines. He's going to explain exactly. So the grasping of it is when it's in your seichel, is yashus bekli. In other words, it's settled and you understand it, and it's in its context, and you understand the context of it, and you understand the meaning of it, and so on and so forth. And therefore, when you're learning, there has to be both of these inyonim. You have to have the kli, and you have to have the inyan that's mufshat, right? The mufshat before it's melubash in particular kalim, like the 1 + 1 = 2, could be 1 + 1 apples, 1 + whatever, right? But you have the inner concept, right? You have to have both of them to be able to say that you understand. But this is still only the inyan, right? It's still only in the inyan of seichel. It's not the experience of elokus. It's not the re'iyah. As the inyan is stripped away from the conceptual, from concepts, that's the depth of the concept, is when it's stripped away from its various manifestations, let's put it that way, from various manifestations, but you get to the etzem inyan, right? And and it's well grasped in his mind. And that's still all talking about hasoga. Without that, and if you don't have that, then you haven't even been yotzi on the inyan of learning at all, right? If it's not to that extent. But when you get not to the mufshat concept behind, but when you experience the mufshat concept behind, in other words, when you experience the elokus in that mufshat concept, then the koiches become koiches elokim. You become you nichnas to get eloki. He gives an example of this from Tanakh. That he became a malach. How did he become a malach? Because his koiches became koiches elokim. So too is it with the true limud of Chassidus. That the koiches, as they are in your guf, you don't have to become a malach to be like this. Nasim elokim, they become elokus. They become koiches elokim. And not koiches sichlim or koiches of havana or koiches of hergesh, but they come koiches elokim. All right, I think we're going to have to stop here because I've got other things I have to do. But it's good to go on and...
what do you want to be the takeaway from it?
What we want to take away from it, well, let me just finish with an inyan of Mashiach. So the Rebbe, when he brings us in of Koiches Elokim, etc., and he says that all of this is all, he stifles me ikra in, and it all comes out from the main thing, it all branches out from the main thing, which is that the Gilu of Chassidus is the Gilu of Pnimius Atik. Pnimius Atik is called Radla, Resha de Lois Yada. In Kesed, there's three madregas, the madrega of Arich Anpin, the madrega of Atik Yomin, or the madrega of Atik. And then Pnimius Atik is called Radla, Reshet Lois Yada, right? Radla, and that's where Chassidus is from. So therefore, all of these inyonim will be Mizgale, Kmo Shehem, and the time that Mashiach comes. That's what he says. But nevertheless, we have to make the effort to get to that inyan even now while we're learning. What do we take away from this? We take away from this that learning Chassidus requires an avoid of Chassidus as well, meaning to say that not only are we learning Chassidus, but we're attempting to get in touch with the Ikar Pnimius HaInyan, which is the Elokus therein. And when we're able to do that, eventually, over a period of time, the koiches themselves are not just stam human koiches that every human being has, but they become koiches Elokim. And this is the avoida of Chassidus, and the being ois in Chassidus does for a person and makes the koiches apnimium into koiches Elokim. I think that's the ikar word. The person becomes much more than just a professor of...
Also tell us that you have to do it just not in a shmiya, but also in a ear, that you need to connect, and it cannot just stay an intellectual research, but it has to be an experience.
Right.
So can you, what's the difference between, let's say a person actually reaches that and does it to the ultimate tachlis of it, and then Mashiach is revealed, so what's the distinction?
I'm sorry.
But when you experience it, you're actually accomplishing something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like how much more is it going to be?
He brings a Xavier from the actual letter itself, which is...
Wow.
Like when Mashiach is revealed, is it going to feel like worlds apart, or is it like just continuation?
No, when Mashiach comes, we're going to say, aha, that's what I was talking about. And then you understand it completely the way it's supposed to be. Aha.
But now, even if we get to this changing over to whatever, Eloki, it's still like different, like a big difference.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you shared, because I had it on my phone and it was very small. I was hard time to read, so I really like that you shared it on the
you can
screen.
share screen in Zoom. You can share screen.
Yeah, that was very good.
I have two screens, so it makes it easy. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Shakaya, thank you so much.
Okay, all the best, and I will send you, I could do one of two things. I could either send you, I could do both actually. I could send you the audio, I could send you the video. Without the video, it's not going to really help because you won't see the text. I could also just post it on YouTube or something like that, and you could check it out over there, posted already, like, but it's
You
up
mean I
to
could
you.
give people a link to the YouTube?
Yeah, I'll give you a link. Yeah.
Whatever you think is easier for people to access. The MyLab audios, people are driving their cars, they can listen whatever, they don't have to look at it, but each thing has.
All right. So I'll send you.
Maybe it's different, depends on who or what their circumstances are.
All right, so I'll send you a link to the audio. I'll send you the audio, and I'll send you a link to the. I'll just post it on YouTube, and I'll send you a link.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thank you very much. That was nice. It was
All
interesting.
right. Good. Kol tov.
Eshel Koyach, thank you.
Okay. Kol tov. B'atzlacha.
Thank you.
A good Yom Tov.